Taxation without representation. We've heard that phrase our whole lives, but where did it actually begin? 11 years before the Declaration of Independence, before all men are created equal was put on paper, Parliament passed a law that helped push 13 separate colonies toward revolution. It was called the Stamp Act of 1765, and the law was simple. If you used paper, you paid. Newspapers, pamphlets, playing cards, dice, legal documents, licenses, if it was printed, it needed a government stamp, and that stamp cost money. Now, this was not the first tax on the colonies. The Sugar Act came the year before, in 1764, and that was a trade duty. Colonists grumbled about it, but it did not light the fire. The Stamp Act was different. This was the first direct internal tax aimed at the colonists themselves, not just their trade, their everyday business, their newspapers, their contracts, their courts, their ability to print and argue and organize. And that is where the fight changed. The 13 colonies were very different places. Different economies, different religions, different local governments, different ways of life. But on this, they started to agree. Only the legislators they elected had the right to tax them. The colonies had no elected representatives in Parliament. No one there answered to them. No one could be voted out by them. So if Parliament could tax them without consent once, what stopped it from doing it again, and again, and again? That was the heart of the objection. It was not simply, we do not want to pay. It was, you cannot tax a free people without giving them a voice. Britain, to be fair, saw this very differently. The British had just won the French and Indian War in 1763. That war removed a major French threat from North America, which absolutely benefited the colonies. But it also left Britain buried in debt, while paying to still keep troops stationed in America. From London's point of view, asking the colonies to pay for their own defense was reasonable. Prime Minister George Grenville and Parliament argued that the money would help cover the cost of maintaining troops on the frontier and defending the Empire's North American colonies after the war. They also argued that Parliament represented all British subjects, even those who did not vote directly for members of Parliament. They called this virtual representation. The colonies rejected that idea. Many colonists were saying they should pay nothing. Some accepted that they should help cover the cost of defense, but they wanted a say in how those taxes were raised, what goods were taxed, and whether their own elected assemblies approved it. That is the difference between a bill and a principle. And in 1765, that principle turned into open resistance. In Virginia, Patrick Henry helped push through the Virginia Resolves, a series of resolutions passed by the House of Burgesses challenging Parliament's authority to tax the colonies directly. As the story goes, Henry thundered, "If this be treason, make the most of it." The colonies were beginning to say something dangerous out loud. Parliament's power had limits. That summer, the Sons of Liberty began to form. They organized boycotts, they pressured stamp distributors to resign, and sometimes the protests turned ugly. In Boston, protesters hanged stamp distributor Andrew Oliver in effigy. Later, a mob destroyed the home of Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson and looted it. The founding was not a clean marble statue, it was messy. It involved courage, principle, politics, fear, anger, and sometimes mob violence. But the constitutional argument was still powerful. No taxation without representation. No laws over a people without their consent. No empire claiming unlimited power over citizens who had no voice in that power. And then something new happened. The colonies started acting together. In October of 1765, representatives from 9 colonies met in New York for the Stamp Act Congress. This was the first major unified political action by the colonies. Not a riot, not a local protest, a coordinated colonial response. They drafted a Declaration of Rights and Grievances. They petitioned King George III and Parliament to repeal the Stamp Act, and they argued, clearly, that only colonial assemblies had the right to tax the colonies internally. It was not independence yet. Most colonists still saw themselves as British subjects. They were not asking to leave the empire. They were asking to be treated as free Englishmen, with the rights they believed came with that identity. But the Stamp Act Congress set a precedent. 13 colonies could disagree on 100 things and still come together when a principle was big enough. And the boycotts worked. British merchants, hurt by colonial non-importation agreements, pressured Parliament to back down. In March of 1766, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. For a moment, it looked like the colonies had won. But the same day Parliament repealed the Stamp Act, it passed the Declaratory Act. And that act said Parliament had the authority to bind the colonies in all cases whatsoever. In other words, we are repealing this tax, but we are not giving up the power. So the Stamp Act crisis ended, but the arguments did not. A tax on paper had forced the colonies to ask a much bigger question. Who gets to rule a free people? And once that question was out there in the open, it could not be put back. The fuse had been lit.